Hi guys, this is Lydia, the lifestyle coach. Welcome to our live feed this week. What we do here is we help people to be free from food struggles using nothing but their brain. So P.S. I am so excited for you guys to see my interview with Susan coming out in a few weeks. She was 41 years a binge eater, and now she is free after just a few weeks of us working together. I'm so proud of her. But one thing she said was she's like, Lydia, that was really a bold promise to just get free using only your brain, and you totally delivered. So yay, I love that. And really, that's all we need, you guys, like our own brains, and you can be absolutely done with this. And in fact, today we're going to talk about something that is a topic that I have chatted about before, but I wanted to specifically talk about it in light of the Me Too hashtag that you guys have seen everywhere. So this is a really neat thing going on. I mean, people all over the world are sharing stories of their sexual assault, their rape, their trauma, to bring awareness to just how common of a thing it is. I made my own post on Facebook with that hashtag, and it is common. And the fact that it's so common is a really horrible thing. What I wanted to talk to you guys about is how this ties into eating disorders and some really damaging myths around that, because I know this is on so many of our minds right now. So, myth number one, that you have an eating disorder because of your trauma. You guys, there are so many ways that eating disorders start. And yes, they may have started because of some sort of trauma, or because there was trauma and then, there was feelings, and then there was, eating for comfort, or there was some sort of well, now I have to diet, or I have to have some control. There are so many ways that an eating disorder can start when those first few binges happen or whatever it is. But the reason that they keep going is because now that way of eating has become a habit. So what started your eating disorder doesn't really matter when you go to fix it. I mean, it matters in yes, it's valid that hard things happen. I mean, horrible things happen, but it doesn't have to matter however it started to just move forward and to be done with it. So there is nothing broken about you. There is nothing that makes you doomed to an eating disorder for the rest of your life. There is so much stigma around eating disorders. And one reason is that this idea that if you have an eating disorder, that it's because you've been abused in some way. And people cite stats all the time about the large percentage of women with eating disorders that have been sexually abused. But sadly, it's just that in general, a large percentage of women have been sexually abused. And that is a sad thing, but it's something that contributes to the stigma of eating disorders. It's no, it's not that it's we have this trauma that creates eating disorders. It's just a lot of women have been very impacted by this trauma, but it doesn't have to be tied into the eating disorder or be a cause of it. So it doesn't mean that you can't be out of food hell if you have experienced this sort of trauma or abuse. So, myth number two, that you have to work through all the trauma before you get better from your eating disorder. So I have coached hundreds of women now, and I have coached women who have been horribly assaulted, raped, abused, all sorts of awful stuff. And I have coached women who have spent over 20 years in therapy working through it. And one big motivator actually for the woman I'm thinking of was, and a very common thing is, the motivator to going and working through all this trauma is so that they could end their eating disorder, because their eating disorder is wrecking their life. And that was always the promise. Work through all of your trauma, and then your eating disorder will just go away because it's caused by the trauma. This is the myth. But when these women work through their trauma, and they've worked through it, they still have an eating disorder. So it is an amazing thing that they got the help they needed for their trauma. I would always encourage that, and that is a beautiful thing. But I see that women are also so upset when they waited 20 years to fix their eating disorder because they thought there was a prerequisite of working through all of the trauma that had ever happened to them. So I coached a woman who was bulimic for 17 years, and we ended her bulimia in about 6 weeks of us working together. And I mean, afterwards, as we were celebrating, you know, we're celebrating her freedom, and she just happened to tell me, you know, like we'd become very close by then, and she was telling me her amazing story of the trauma that she had been through. And I'm so proud of her for everything that she has overcome. But please note that we didn't talk once about her trauma for her to be done with her eating disorder. We just took a direct approach and ended her eating disorder. Myth number 3. Your eating disorder is a way of coping with your trauma. So here's the myth. You have a problem in your life, and then you eat to cope with that problem. And until you can cope with that problem in a different way, you will keep binging. So let's look at that for a minute. So in the moment, when you're really down, if you don't have some other perfectly developed way to cope, then you just have to binge. Like, it's your only way of coping. Do you see how disempowering that is? It's like saying that you have to binge because you haven't developed some other coping mechanism. Try on this perspective. You have a problem and you have an eating disorder. So now you have 2 problems. And now it's double coping. You're having to cope with your problems and you're having to cope with your eating disorder. I mean, maybe those with eating disorders actually have more coping skills because we're dealing with so much. So instead, you end your eating disorder. And then you take all of that extra energy and money and mental space and health and freedom and apply it to fixing your other problems. Doesn't that sound like a better way? And it works really well. So I want to say that we are here with you, all of those who have been mistreated. It is a horrible thing, and I would want us to, 1, take measures to stop the horrible things that happen, to 2, support those victims, and to 3, help them seek whatever help they need to heal. And my message is, please do not let anyone tell you that you are broken because of what somebody else did to you. Or that if you suffer from an eating disorder, that you are doomed to it until you fix everything else that you are dealing with because of someone else's actions. I say freedom now. Get your life back as soon as possible from the prison of this habit so that you can deal with your real life as a free woman. And if you want help with this, you can go to www.lydialifestyle.com and apply for a free session to get you started. But this is Lydia, the lifestyle coach, signing off. Thanks you guys for being here for another live feed, and mwah.